Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I'm joined by Ryan Pearce, Sean Conley and Chris McElwain. We're here, of course, to talk about Celtic 1, Brugge 1. I'll start with you, Chris. And I'm just saying there, it just shows you the expectation levels and how they've changed, that you're almost disappointed to just draw in the Champions League.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's validation for how much progress we've made in Europe this year. Look, this was a tough watch. It was sloppy. It was scrappy. I would say it was, outside of the Dortmund game, probably our worst overall performance in the Champions League. I just think in terms of some of the silly mistakes we made, it does make you wonder, the what if situation. If we hadn't scored that very avoidable own goal in the first half, I think we would have went on and won that game, because I don't think Brugge were better than us tonight. In fact, I think some of their play, lacked, some of the basics that ours lacked, and it was just two sides that kind of cancelled each other out. Second half was much better in terms of intensity. Magnificent goal from Maeda. I was actually quite surprised to see him taken off, because I thought that galvanised him. But yeah, there were a few players who, unfortunately, tonight just couldn't get to grips with the game. I think, a few key suspects, Hatate for one. I think Taylor, the difference when Valle came on after Taylor went off, I thought was very apparent. I actually think I know there's a lot of debate over who's the better player. I thought there was much more balance to the side with Valle and Bernardo on tonight when they eventually came on. And I was very surprised, as I say, see Hatate stay on. I thought he looked as though he was running on empty. First touch wasn't there. I love his attitude. That didn't change. He was wanting to take ownership and take on the ball, but it just wasn't effective. And I think by the end there, when he was the man that the ball fell to for that last chance, I just thought this is one player I didn't want to get on the ball at that point, because I just thought it's not been happening for him tonight. So so it proved. But no, you're right, disappointed, but it is a measurement of how well we've done that I'm disappointed after a 1-1 draw. And I think under different circumstances, probably, looked at that and said that's a decent result.
Yeah, it was the first half, wasn't it, Ryan? We were poor in the first half. I think we were looking for a big improvement in the second. Was it a big enough improvement for you?
There was definitely an improvement, especially with the first subs coming on. I think Valle was... There's the two words I came, if I can describe the entire team that I kept on going back to, was timid and isolated. Mm-hmm. A lot of people were more concerned about making a mistake than making that line-breaking pass. And when we got someone that we wanted on the ball, or kind of, it wasn't just going between Trusty and Carter Vickers, because I think of all of our successful passes, that was probably about 95% of them. You just know players around them. Everyone's being man-marked really, really closely, and then just complete isolation. There's no choice but to go back. So it was good to see, Bernardo. I don't necessarily think he was doing anything special. I felt like he was making himself a little bit more available. Engels, I feel like he was like, okay, Kalmack's got the ball. I'm gonna run and be on the shoulder of the last defender, and then it goes back to the isolated. Really, really confused why we saw that final sub, or the final two subs, and Rio was kept on that pitch. I love Rio. I think he's an excellent player. I know he's due criticism when he's due criticism. I'm seeing a lot of comments in family chat and in some of the chat here about how he should never be on the pitch and stuff like that. He has these type of games, which is expected. Why is he still on the pitch? Bring on McCowan, bring on someone else. I feel like it was a big question mark for me. And is there something with McCowan that Brendan doesn't trust? To have him not do that, I'm not sure. So that for me is, I feel like the reason that game did not get over the line as a win. I feel like too many opportunities came to him and broke down. And it was just really confusing for me.
Yeah, it's one of the ones, I think, Sean, if we're going to stick to that conversation just now, that subject, Rio Hatate, he changed the game at the weekend. It was his second half performance. Mm-hmm. And then you see a game like tonight, and I'm like Ryan, I think he's a phenomenal player. And I've said this time and time again, there are certain aspects of his game where he does things and you think no one else in the midfield, we don't have another midfielder who could do that. Tonight wasn't his night, but it looked as though we did plan to take him off for McCowan, and then there was a change of heart. What do you think that was about?
Almost definitely just Kuhn's put his hand up and said he was done. So hopefully it's not an injury. Hopefully he's just gubbed. Because as you said, McCowan was getting stripped. But yeah, Hatate was effectively a man down tonight, and you can hang Bernardo's yellow card around his neck as well. That was his loss of possession, where Bernardo has to commit that foul and eat the yellow card. Should have just given the yellow card to Hatate. It was so much his fault, to be honest. But yeah, look, he was very, very frustrating tonight. He's an enigmatic player. I was most disappointed, I think, in terms of substitutions, like I think taking Maeda off might have been a mistake because, as you said, Kuhn ends up having to come off later anyway. Because Maeda came out absolutely firing in that second half, and he was the kind of catalyst for us turning it around from the second minute in when he puts the centre back under pressure and gets him booked. Obviously, his involvement in the goal, and he was just really like his press and there was the point where the Brugge right back just puts James Forrest on toast, just goes by him like he's not there. And if Maeda's on, that doesn't happen. So I think that one was, I don't know if I call it a mistake, because maybe there's something more about Maeda's legs or whatever having run. But I would have liked to have had Maeda on longer there. Even though he was relatively poor in the first half, I think he was the difference in the second half. And I think Taylor as well, just before Taylor goes off, I don't know if that was the scheduled sub, but there's a moment for Taylor just before he gets subbed where he makes a terrible decision where he's under pressure, fair enough, and he does well to get the ball down the line to Kuhn. But first, I have no idea why. Like, Kuhn has not got the ball under control at all, and Taylor just decides to go on an overlap off down the pitch, and it leaves two Brugge players, the ones that put him under pressure, absolutely free. Kuhn gets dispossessed. There's a massive gap, and it ends up with Olsen at the back post, putting one just over the bar. So I don't know if Taylor was subbed because of that, or if he saw that Valle was warming up and decides that he's just going to go off. But man, that was a real poor. And that's the sort of decisions like what Brugge were really good at tonight. Was like they were really intelligent. They were really composed. They look like a team that's played well in the Champions League for years now. And when you see decisions like that from Taylor, and Hatate's performance tonight, that's the opposite that we're expecting from our players. It's the opposite that we got from them in RB Leipzig. They were shown those composures in that game and not tonight. I'd say it was an even game. I think 1-1's a relatively fair result. If you had to pick a team that was better, it wouldn't be us, unfortunately.
Yeah, I do think it was fair. At the end of the game, I was looking at that, and I know that we came into our own in the second half. The first 15 minutes of which, Chris, I basically looked at that and thought, right, there was 3 moments in that first 15 minutes. The first one was actually a Schmeichel save, a very, very good save, a very important one, right at the very start of the second half. Then we make the substitutions, and they're pivotal for me. Baye and Bernardo come on, both make a really positive contribution, and almost instantly we get the equaliser. So let's start off with Schmeichel, because again, we were looking at that situation in the first half. And let's be honest, guys, we don't balls that up in the first half, and we might have come away with a win, albeit we weren't great tonight. But that save by Schmeichel, just at the start of the second half, Chris, that was huge.
We needed that because I think, I'm sorry to say it, but I think if we'd lost a goal right at the start of the second half, I think it was lights out. I think we would have struggled to recover from that, because mentally we looked a little bit fragile after the own goal in the first half. I know we did relatively decent immediate reaction to it, but we never really got to grips with the game. And I think it was important that we came through the first part, the opening part of the second half unscathed, and Schmeichel was a huge part of that. And it allowed us to just regroup, keep our structure, and then eventually, Maeda produces that moment of magic. But this is what you get with Schmeichel, right? I mean, this is, week on week, game after game, the guy is phenomenal. Now, I still reserve a little bit of criticism. I need to see it back. I mean, I wasn't able to see too many replays, but the opening goal, the own goal for Carter Vickers, I still question why Schmeichel wasn't back in his goal during that passage of play, or at least closer to his goal than he eventually was. But fundamentally, and a few people have pointed it out from the training pitch, if you're passing a ball back to a goalkeeper, whether you're aware if he's there or not, you don't pass it between the sticks. So fair enough. I believe that's a fundamental. So won't apportion blame to full blame to either player there. I just think we have to do better collectively in situations like that. But when it comes to doing the basics of the goalkeeping role, Schmeichel is absolutely phenomenal, and he is a huge reason why we have had such good results this season. And listen, tonight, I don't think we can be gloom and doom. We didn't play well and we've come away with a draw. That's something that actually I think we should celebrate to an extent. The performance wasn't great, players were off it, but look, again, we've taken a point here which is going to move us up that table again. If this is our bad game or an off night and we get a draw, I'll take it. I'll take it. I think it's a positive result, and we should view it that way. But you're absolutely right, Paul John. We cannot underestimate how important it is to have someone, and particularly considering who he's following in Joe Hart, someone so reliable between the sticks.
The big thing as well, you look at our season domestically, we've been very dominant, but there was that night in Dortmund, Ryan, and I remember after the game, some people thought I was insane because I thought that Schmeichel actually kept it under double figures. I mean, there were 3 or 4 saves that night. Yeah. He's been outstanding for us this season, and like Chris says, you're stepping in to someone who became a real cornerstone of our success over the last few campaigns with Joe Hart. And I'm just going to pinpoint that moment because, if we do win 7 points from our final 4 games like we were talking about before the game, we'll look back on that moment. That was huge because I agree. I think that the game would have run away from us had they gone 2-0 up at that stage, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was thinking about this as he made another save later on in the second half. What we talk about, his distribution and the ball at his feet, his shot stopping is excellent, but also the amount of times that he catches the ball instead of palming it out, I think is really impressive, almost to the point where I have to remind myself this is, a 39-year-old Danish international keeper that's won the Premier League and has years and years of experience. This is not, anyone else. So it impresses me how much he holds on to that. So I can joke to myself and make a funny blame for him on the own goal because he's been that good that CCV was just like, yeah, he's there. He's going to get it. I don't even have to look. I think to be fair to him, if you watch it back, I think whoever was it Kuhn or AJ that was running back, he recognized that he didn't have an out ball and he ran more to the edge of the box to give him an out ball, and at the last minute the ball's played to CCV, so then he has to get back into it. And not only did CCV just not play the ball in the right spot, he played it to the far corner against where he was, so it gave him all to do. But yeah, we're gonna look at these moments. It's why we brought a player like him in. It'd be interesting to see. I think it's up to him if he wants to do another year, but I would love to have him for another year, especially because I think we can all agree at this point in the season we would have expected we've seen a little, like at least one appearance from Sinisalo. So that plan that we have for bringing in a younger keeper to learn and then eventually be the number one. If that's the case, then you'd be expecting they get a few more starts than now. So I really hope he does sign for another year.
Another big aspect of it, I felt, Ryan, was when we let that calamitous goal in. And obviously, Callum McGregor gets the huddle together, but one of the most vocal, in fact, maybe more vocal than the captain, was Kasper Schmeichel, Sean. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know what happens behind the scenes, but he seems to be a proper leader, very much like Joe Hart was over the last 3 seasons.
Yeah, speaking of Joe Hart, I thought he was great tonight on co-coms.
Brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant.
Calls it so well. Like, he was really good. Like, even stuff he was saying about the referee, he was spot on as well. Like, there's one where he calls in the first half where the referee bottles a decision. Joe Hart calls it immediately, and I was like, yep. As a referee, I totally agree. That, but so I thought he had a good game. But yeah, I actually think you're right about Kalmak and Schmeichel, and it was almost like they weren't really controlling the game though, and it was like there wasn't really anyone took the game under control tonight. There wasn't anyone stood up. He really struggled to pick a man in the match tonight. I don't know who UEFA, I'm sure, are going to give it to probably Van Aken for Brugge, or maybe even Sis at right back. There's quite a few players in that Brugge team that you would say we could fit easily into our team. Not the right back in the sense that Alistair Johnston's a great player, but their left back was probably better than ours, and Van Aken probably fit in midfield. So they're not a bad team at all, and like we're disappointed that we didn't win our home game against a team that we see as a peer or want to see as a peer, but tonight was a reality check, and Brugge are a better team than us. They are. It's at the moment anyway. On all evidence, they beat Aston Villa away they're slightly better than us tonight, so we have to, I guess, try and put a positive slant on this point, even if there was high expectations and high hopes for 3 points tonight.
If I was to put a positive slant on it, I would probably, what I'm taking from this tonight is we were far from our best. We have come up against a team that you're saying there, Sean, our peers, probably, yeah, you want that to be your kind of level. We make a terrible mistake in the first half, yet, Chris, we come away without a defeat. And I think that's because there is a level of character shown there in the respect that we didn't collapse. You know, even though we had a really poor first half, Carter Vickers, the one guy in defence you wouldn't expect to make a mistake, makes a mistake, but we come back from it. And I think that's the positive I'm going to take from tonight.
Yeah, I agree. I actually saw something on the socials earlier that made me chuckle, and that, you know, I think Carter Vickers and Tyrone Mings must have money on the Brugge to win the Champions League this year, because given the 2 goals that, you know, respective teams have conceded. No, I think you're 100% right. Had we known beforehand that we were going to turn up and play the way we did tonight, and we were off it, we did not play to our usual level. The fluency wasn't there. I don't think the balance and the link up play and the pressing that we normally perform so effectively, both domestically and in Europe this season, it just wasn't there. So I think if we'd known we were going to turn up and play that way, we'd have taken a draw beforehand. And I think we've got to view it that way. We had an element of fortune with the offside goal. You know, you don't always get those decisions in Europe. So I think on reflection tonight, we'll look back at this and we'll say that was a decent point earned. Disappointed because of the standards we've set. Yeah, absolutely. I want to see us win every game and win it comfortably. I think if we had been on our game tonight, I think we would have came away with potentially 3 points today. You know, if we'd cut out the mistakes and perform to the level that we can. And that's no disrespect to Brugge, but I not to contradict Sean's point, well, I think Brugge, yeah, on paper are a better team. You know, they've got more tenure there, and they've, you know, certainly got more resources, and they've got certainly a few decent players there. I think the way we've performed in Champions League showed that we can play at that level. And I think on a different day, we'd have given them a real tough night tonight, particularly playing at home. I just think tonight, too many of the pieces just didn't fit the puzzle. And I think a few players didn't perform to the levels we know they're capable of. We've mentioned a few. Hatate. I don't think Kalmak had his usual influence. Taylor, not on it for me. Kyogo, pretty anonymous tonight. So, yeah, I think on another day, we come away a better result. But on reflection, tonight's performance, getting a draw, we should be grateful.
We look at the Champions League table now. Liverpool, top of the table, with 15 points, maximum points for Liverpool. Celtic sitting in 19th, and we are on 8 points alongside PSV Eindhoven and Man City. We're above Juventus, who are on 7 points, Feyenoord, Brugge, and Dynamo Zagreb. So, yeah, still in the hunt. And when you look at it over its entirety, first 5 games, would we have expected 8 points? You know what? We've had some cracking results in there. I want to talk about the changes before we get to the goal, though, Ryan, and I'll come to you first, because 2 of the most impressive performers for me in the second half were Brugge and Bernardo. They both came on after, I think, 59 minutes. There's plenty of people in the comments saying, oh, they should have started. That's all right with hindsight. Yeah. But it's like, true what you're saying, sometimes it's difficult to put your finger on it with Bernardo, but he does seem to get himself into influential areas and spaces of the game. Brugge, what's different about him? Is it his directness? He hates passing the ball back the way. And it was his directness, actually, that created the space and the chance for Maida to score the goal. So how impressed were you with those 2 substitutes?
I was impressed with both of them. It's good having people or players like that coming in that you can trust. Valle, especially, who hasn't been in the team, because Bernardo gets his token, appearance almost every single game. For him to come in after kind of being out in the cold and the rumors, I mean, we are all thinking in the back of the head, maybe behind the scenes, Barca said he's coming back to us 1st of Jan. So Brendan's like, well, then I'm not investing in him anymore, which I hope is not true, because I would love to have this guy signed up. When going back to my earlier statement where I said if I had to pick 1 or 2 words, it was timidness and isolation. He was isolated at times, but then he had a little bit of guile about him and a little bit of, confidence, and just to turn his defender and not necessarily make that predictable pass. And I think that's kind of what it goes back to when we see so many times of past games, the Leipzig game especially, they were pressing us high and we were playing some risky passes and beating the press. To do that, you need to kind of make have some confidence and make a pass. And I think we were just completely shell shocked by it. And every player was just like, don't make a mistake, recycle the ball, don't make a mistake, recycle. So you needed those players to kind of come in and have a little bit. No, I'm gonna fake a pass. I'm gonna turn inside and play it into the middle. So it's great for their confidence. It's going to be easy to see what happens. I feel like it's unfair for everyone to be putting Bernardo and Engels up against each other. They are different players. They're going to fit into different games, into different situations. So I want to see Bernardo start a bit more, but it's just going to be interesting to figure out how we get all these players to tick all at the same time. But it was delightful to have them come on and influence the game almost immediately.
Yeah, Tony Daverin, great to see you as always. I agree, it's Bernardo and Baye for me. You're looking for them to get some starts. Danielle comes in also, and I think it's interesting to point out that Trusty was excellent. I looked at his performance and he was solid. Bernardo was far better than Engels. Engels is getting a bit of stick, Sean. Now that happens, and we're very reactive as football fans, but Engels is getting a lot of stick in the comment section. Is it merited? I know he wasn't at his best tonight, but this seems to be a pattern that I've noticed in the comment section.
Look, you can, I think there was much more than Engels that was a problem tonight. But at halftime, we sat and we talked about how we just had no control in midfield. The Brugge had the absolute run of it. We talked about at halftime as well how Kuhn was completely isolated with no support from Engels, Johnson or Kyogo. So there's definitely some very valid criticisms there. But I think one thing that I noticed as well is it was a good 30 minutes into the match before we had any sustained possession. A good 15 minutes into the match before we had any press. There was a mental and possibly physical fatigue about the players tonight. I don't know if they thought that the crowd was just going to lift them and carry them over because they weren't lifting themselves. And I don't know if and then in the second half when we did come out and we were better for the first, I know they get the first chance and Schmeichel keeps us in it. They get the goal disallowed, which I thought immediately was offside, and luckily was. And even they had a couple other chances apart from that. But even that being said, I thought we were decent. We had a lot of possession. But what we weren't doing with that possession was we weren't being incisive. And Bruges weren't sitting too deep. They were pressing like just 5 yards inside their own half. But we were too afraid to take them on. And the reason for that was every time we went and played that pass, they were straight on it. And they were much more physical. They were fast. They were strong, which is something we're not used to coming up against in Scotland. Like normally when that goes out to Kuhn, he's up against like someone not quite at the same athletic level as De Brugge and De Cooper. And we just looked like we didn't have an answer for that physicality that Bruges had. We knew that if we put it into a tight position, we were going to struggle. So it worked well for Bruges, and we struggled to get around that, and we weren't at our best. I actually thought Bernardo when he came on did well. Kind of what he does is juggle the possession quite well, which was something. And we're talking about criticizing Engels. Well, Engels didn't do that, and Hatate didn't do that. But Bernard, and you can say Bernardo's coming on against tired players. He's coming on playing against subs, but still he did it. And Engels and Hatate didn't.
Be interesting to see if any changes along those lines are made this weekend. DJ, you're in. Sergio Ticino, remember them? Yeah, that was the casuals choice from the 80s, wasn't it? Might as well say it. He should have started Baye Bernardo. The boss got it wrong, but he's allowed a mistake. I don't know. Before the game, we were looking at that starting 11, Chris. I think we were largely happy with it. There was always that discussion around the midfield. Everybody's got a different opinion about it. Why is Engels playing over Bernardo? There is no comparison. Bernardo's had quiet games as well. And sometimes players make more of an impact when they come into a match, like Sean says. Tom Hatate should have been hooked. It would be interesting to see why he wasn't, Tom, because, McCowan was getting stripped. Hatate was the obvious choice for the substitution, and then they changed their mind. Andy Logan, Brugge look a good European side, to be fair. Do we at this stage, Chris? I think we still look at that table and think, we're still in this. You look at the young boys game, I still think we can win it. Dynamo Zagreb, draw or a win will do us. And then obviously Villa, whatever happens down there, who knows. But I'm still feeling pretty good about the campaign. It wasn't the best performance.
Yeah, I think there's a little element of imposter syndrome with us at the moment. I understand that, given a previous or most recent European record. So I understand the fact that we're looking at other teams and say we need to get to that level. We need to get to that level. Which, you know what, actually, up to this point, and even including tonight, if you take the result into consideration, we are playing at that level, right? We had a bad game tonight, and we came away with a point. Right, we have to put that into context. And I think when we look back at this over the next couple of days on the bulletin, we'll be thinking, you know what, actually, wasn't a case of getting away with one. We did push our way back into that game in the second half and actually finished the game the stronger of the two teams. And we created a few chances. And yeah, absolutely, Brugge are an established, tenured modern-day European side, and they are tough opposition. But this is a competition where you're going to come up against tough opposition each and every fixture you play. We have to start believing that we belong at this level, and we have to start reflecting that on the park. Tonight, some players played beneath themselves, I firmly believe. I think if we can up our levels, and Sean makes a brilliant point, we are not getting challenged enough at domestic level. And I'm not going to denigrate Scottish football, but we're simply not getting challenged week on week to the same extent by the time we come up against teams like Brugge. So maybe there is an element of that. But look, this is a competition we want to play in. This is what we aspire to play in. This is where we want to suddenly, we want to sustain our position in this competition. So for me, we've got to start believing that this is a level that we can compete at. What we want to see going forward now is that belief and that ambition matched in the recruitment window. There's definitely areas that we can still improve and build on strong foundations. We need to see that in January if we want to continue making this type of progress. But I think, honestly, we'll look back tonight and we'll say, really good point. It was a point gained as opposed to 2 points lost is the perception we can take. And that doesn't mean that I'm not disappointed that we didn't take 3 points tonight. I just think on reflection, the way the game went, it was a point gain tonight, and I'm happy with that.
You've touched on recruitment, and I want to talk about Maeda before we wrap up tonight. But on the recruitment subject, I think, you mentioned it before the game. When you're looking at the fact that Maeda was surprisingly taken off, Kuhn was done, and you don't see that domestically these days, which we're talking about the levels. And we need to call on the bench again to bring on a winger. And it's at that point, and it's nothing. It's not an opportunity for me to have a dig at Yang or Palmer, but it's not there. You don't have that option at that moment. A player that you can throw on there and think they're going to be the game changer. It just isn't there. We've got the question mark around the left back. I think Ryan makes a brilliant point. If Barca have made their feelings known about that, I can understand why a manager would no longer wish to develop the player. I remember when Lenny came in, one of the first things he did, remember, when he took over from Brendan Rodgers, was Ollie Burke and Benkovic, you're not playing because you're not going to be with us next season, and I'm trying to plan for the next campaign. So I get it, but when Baye comes on and plays like that, and he's both positive and the passing is going offensively more often than not, and he makes a great assist for the goal, then it's hard to argue not to play him at the weekend. Let's talk about Maeda a wee bit, Ryan. Let's be positive. Let's finish on a high. What a goal. And I remember last season, when Brendan Rodgers came in, people were looking at remember when everybody becomes body language expert guys, right? Everybody's looking at Maeda going, oh, he's no happy. Maeda's no happy. And then he signs a new contract. And there was people online talking about the fact that, he's never a footballer and all the rest of it. And I remember saying at the time, when he's fit, he plays. He is on he's one of the first names on my starting lineup. I know his deficiencies. That's 3 and 5 he's got in the Champions League this season, Ryan. What a goal.
It was great. I mean, to play, though, to some of the naysayers for Maeda is he scores a cracker as he slips. So if he stood on his feet, where that would have gone. No, I know. I love him. I love him as a player. I think one of the major reasons that has helped Brendan get a tune out of this team, as we saw some frustrations early on in last season, was finally figuring out how to deploy and utilize Maeda the right way. He's such a unique player. He's not, I struggle to think about any other player I've had on Celtic. I've seen in the Scottish League. I've seen in the Champions League. I follow the English League a little bit. I can struggle to find anyone that has similar attributes to the way he does. So he can frustrate at times. He can be a little timid and not go. He can go too much and skyrocket a left-footed cross across the way. But he is such a danger, and I completely agree that he's the best counter presser in the league or in the world at this point. So yeah, just keep on investing in him. But it does make it a little bit interesting is that you bring him off. How does the team adapt to it? If Palma was playing to the level that he was at last year when he was one of our best contributors for assists and goals, you still have that interesting thing is that the team as a whole has to adjust to this. So I think that's one of the unique challenges of how do we fill that role of someone that can compete with them on the left-hand side, that doesn't give a team that's okay, I'm bringing in a good player, but it's just changing it so much that we just got to completely, adjust our approach. I don't know how they solve that, but it's going to be an interesting thing for me. But yeah, what a goal! I feel bad for my dog because I was shouting at Hatate beforehand, and then I was shouting at it, and he just sees me shouting, and so he doesn't know what's going on. But we'll get through it together.
Yeah, and he let out this primal scream. I mean, it sometimes doesn't show any emotion, Sean, but he certainly did when he scored that goal tonight.
Yeah, and when would be the last time we had someone score 3 goals in Champions League? I'm trying to figure it out just now while I was listening to Ryan there. Samaras got 3 in 2012, but I don't know if it's happened since then. You'd be going back to Larson and Sutton as well. I think past that. So it was like, as Ryan said, he does slip, but it was like he nearly broke the post in half. So we'll take it. I would have liked to. There was a couple. Yeah, I think if Hatate catches that volley at the end and that goes in, we're having a very different conversation. But it just, I don't think Maeda's tried to do exactly what he's done, but he's done it and he's made a great run and he's absolutely rattled it in off the post. And if Hatate gets the same fortune in the last minute, then we could be having a very different conversation about a world-class goal to win a game. And Hatate's suddenly a £30 million player, but instead he gets it closer to the corner flag. And, we're talking about being disappointed. So the games can turn, narratives can turn on these moments. And it was good to see Maeda get that goal in his 3rd in this campaign.
Yeah.
Are you accusing the Celtic support of recency bias?
I thought you were going to say that Rio becomes a £30 million player again, because that seems to go up and down, doesn't it? That opinion. Tony Daverin, thank you for supporting the channel. It's always appreciated. How else can you support us? Give us a big thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And if you want to come along and see us live, not many tickets left for Johnny Collins. And obviously, we've got the Centenary Boys as well. All the links under the video. Join us again tomorrow at 12:30 for a Celtic State of Mind. All that's left for me to say thank you to Chris and Ryan and Sean for joining me on Acsom.
Yeah.
Cheers.